Hi, welcome to this webinar. I'm Julie Yaki. Strategic and tactical thinking are complementary skills that help corporations and individuals achieve their goals. It's important to understand how they each shape the planning and execution of work at different levels in the organization. This webinar will highlight the differences between strategy and tactics, introduce essential aspects of strategic thinking, and provide some tools and methods to use and demonstrate strategic thinking effectively. I hope you enjoy the presentation. All right, good afternoon or good morning. I'm Julie Yaki, and I welcome you to our webinar on strategy versus tactics and how to create and communicate vision through strategic thinking. Before I welcome and introduce our presenters, let me cover a few housekeeping items. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the US Win YouTube channel. To interact with our presenters and the other participants, please use the chat feature and feel free to engage in conversation in the chat about our topic. There's also opportunity for you to ask questions through the QA feature, so please enter your questions there, and we'll monitor the questions throughout the webinar and address them during or at the end of the presentation. And if at any time you wish to come off mute, please raise your hand. And last but not least, have your phone ready to scan the QR codes for our Slido polls. Now on to our webinar and our presenters. As you know, one of US Win's strategic objectives is to provide professional development opportunities for career advancement. One of the ways to advance your career is by demonstrating your leadership skills, and an important aspect of that is being able to think strategically and communicate that vision effectively. This webinar will introduce essential aspects of strategic thinking and provide practical tools and methods to use and demonstrate it. Our presenters will also highlight the differences between strategic and tactical thinking and how they come together to help organizations and individuals achieve their goals. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters, Brittany Jarka and Giselle Gamble from the Talent and Organizational Development Group at Constellation, who will be presenting our webinar today. Brittany has been with Constellation for 11 years and is the Manager of Enterprise Learning and Organizational Development. She is particularly proud of launching and continuously improving the company's enterprise-wide Emerging Leader program, as well as the RISE program, which is a new initiative fostering cross-business collaboration. Giselle has been with Constellation for 20 years, and she is the Talent and Leadership Programs Manager. Giselle is proud to have spearheaded the Attract, Retain, Develop, and Advance Executive Leadership Program, as well as leading the Thrive program that brings together a diverse cohort of high potential leaders at Constellation and helps drive their success in preparation for senior leadership roles. So Brittany and Giselle, thank you so much for bringing your expertise to us today. And with that, I hand it over to you to start the presentation.
Hello, Julie and everyone. Thank you so much for having us and really appreciate that warm introduction. So we're super thrilled to be able to spend some time with you all. And just as Julie shared, we're going to explore strategic thinking. So whether you're tuning in from your home office, workplace, cozy cafe, we're really glad that you're here with us for a little bit of time. So I like to make things interactive. To kick it off right away, I wanted to get us engaged and comfortable in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind indulging me and maybe share what's one goal that you're currently working towards, either personally or professionally. This will help Giselle and I kind of test the waters and see everybody's response. So if you want to share one goal that you're currently working on, personally or professionally. And one thing that I would share is that I'm working on cutting out sugar from my life. I see retirement. Congratulations. Completing your bachelor's degree, getting a reactor engineering cadre program started, getting PE license, working on professional networking. I love all these. So much growth going on. Finding time with a busy schedule. I love that. Well, thank you so much for showing up in the chat there. Feel free to continue to share and keep these goals top of mind. We'll work our way into weaving them into the conversation here. So, Julie already did an amazing job introducing us. I will just share here, you can see our names and our titles. Giselle Gamble is my amazing colleague that is going to co-facilitate with me. She is the Talent and Leadership Programs Manager at Constellation. We both have started at nuclear sites. So we share that experience with many of you here. And my name is Brittany Jarka, the Manager of Enterprise Learning and OD. So we have lots to dig into, and I know we're ready to get into the content. I see we're moving along. So agenda for today, we're here to help you maximize your leadership potential. Whether you're an individual contributor or a people leader, people manager, we all have the opportunity to influence others and lead or support projects. So anytime throughout this presentation, if you hear Giselle and I refer to you all as leaders, that's what we mean. We see everybody as a leader regardless of where they sit in their org. We're going to talk about strategic thinking, components of strategic thought, sharing some tools. There's lots of tools in here, so don't feel overwhelmed. Some of the intent is for you to dig into those further after the session. And then we'll close out by communicating the new strategy, giving you some ideas about how to talk about it. So we'll keep moving here. And Giselle and I have the privilege of doing lots of fun, amazing presentations. And we always like to start off with some sort of rules of engagement, if you will, or some tips for a great session. So first one here is, do please stay present with us. I see the chat going and I love that. So please keep it coming. That helps us know that you're here with us, that you're staying present. Use the chat. I already said that. Definitely participate, kind of all along the same lines here. If you have other applications open, I would encourage you to close those so you can focus on the information sharing. And it's not just about what Giselle and I are going to share. There are going to be things that you'll be able to learn from your peers that are in the session. And then absolutely, try and apply what you can afterwards as you reflect on the content. So that was our logistics. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Giselle, and we can dig into, what exactly strategic thinking is, why we might be talking about it. So welcome. Thanks a lot for joining me, Giselle.
All right. Thank you, Brittany, for that. So, why strategic thinking, right? Why should we be talking about this topic? And one of the first reasons is because several studies have shown that there's a need for more development in the area of strategic thinking. Now, you can find the references here at the bottom, but here some of the most impactful numbers, starting with that 30%. And 30% of managers say that they have failed to coordinate across units as their greatest challenge to executing their company strategy. And then only 11% of managers believe that all their company strategic priorities have the financial and human resources needed for success. And then the last one here, only 9% of companies are rated excellent at the execution of strategy. Now, those are not very good numbers, right? Now, I can tell you that for my specific role, I lead one of the executive leadership development programs at our company. And as part of the program, we usually do 360-degree assessments for all our participants, and you would be surprised how strategic thinking usually always comes up as an issue, as a problem area, as an area that they need to work on. Now, I can tell you, I want to share a very personal story because several years ago, when I was in one of my roles in the innovation department, I had a one-on-one with my director, and she's amazing. and very knowledgeable, lots of experience. So I really trusted her and I really wanted to get some feedback from her. And I said, how can I get better? I mean, how can I succeed in this role? And the first thing that she said, I need you to be more strategic. And I'm like, okay, so that's great. Like, I loved getting that feedback, but I wasn't sure entirely what she meant by that. Like, what does that mean? Like, I need to be more strategic. How do I actually do that? I'm not entirely sure how to do that. So I really made it my mission to find out what it was, learn about it, and then be able to do that, to be more strategic and to show that I was being more strategic. Now, some of you have probably gone through performance reviews as well, sharing with your manager. Perhaps you're getting ready for a promotion or you would like to get a promotion. Maybe you've gotten it through feedback that you're doing a good job, but in order to get to the next level, you need to be more strategic. I know I can't be the only one that has gotten that feedback before. So we're trying to get you there today and trying to figure it out how we actually get there. So,
Thanks so
Brittany.
much for that, Giselle. I feel like that can resonate with so many of us. We both talk to many leaders, and that's often something that they share with us. And I really appreciated you sharing that from your own personal experience. So we've gotten some of the, why should we focus on strategic thinking? It's this hard thing to sort of nail down. And as we dig into that, I'm going to keep bringing the interaction to you all, I promise. So I see lots of responses in the chat, and I'll ask you to respond to this sort of icebreaker here. We have some letters listed, EUHGNA, and some of you may have seen this before. But I would ask you to consider how you could rearrange these letters to form a common word. And when you think of that, go ahead and drop it in the chat. So I'll give you just a moment here. Can we rearrange these letters to form a different common word? Hang up. Yes, it does work, although that's not the one that I'm driving towards. What else can we create? Any other common, just looking for one word. Hang up is two. Anything else?
Hang up doesn't have the E. I'm just saying.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thanks. Thanks for the backup there. I'll give it just like a few more seconds. Is there, yes, correct, or the P. I really appreciate the backup there. So we have to use all the letters here, looking for one word. All right, I don't want us to get too hung up on it, so we can advance. And what the word actually is change. So a little bit of trick in there, but the purpose is that you did have the opportunity to turn the U on its side to form a C. And I love that somebody put in there, there's no U in change. Yeah, because we had to turn it. So the whole purpose here is that many of us operate on fixed mental models. We're given this set of letters and think that they have to stay this way. But what we could do to expand our thinking, especially as we're thinking about strategy, is that maybe there's an opportunity for us to tip something on its side or look at things a little bit differently. It helps us to start think outside of the box and kind of challenge those fixed or ingrained ways of thinking that we have. So I'll ask another question here. I'd ask us to consider how maybe this relates to being a strategic leader, because you're like, change, I had to turn these letters around, it's not resonating. But really, in order for us to be strategic, we need to look at situations from different angles. We have to really be deliberate, analytical, and also there's a certain level of willingness to challenge patterns of our thinking and behavior. So thank you for indulging me in that one there. we're going to keep things moving. And we're going to switch gears a little bit into Slido as our form of interaction. So there is a QR code on your screen. You can either navigate to slido.com and put in the numeric code, or you can use your mobile device to scan the QR code. I'll give you all just kind of a second here to get into Slido, and we'll use this a couple times in the session. So Giselle had shared why we should focus on strategic thinking, and she shared an experience of some feedback that she received that maybe resonates with some of us. But what I want you to share in the chat is, what is strategic thinking? Before we kind of share a working definition of what we think it is, what the research says, we want to hear what your thoughts are. So I have the first one in there: solutions outside of the box. And if you can't get into Slido, feel free to add it in the chat as well. Thinking outside of the box, I like that. Definitely tying into our just previous interaction, seeing the bigger picture, broader perspective, driving towards growth, forecasting, lots more thinking bigger. We can see the themes at the top: big picture, box, offering an alternative, tactical thinking. Okay, I like that. Calculated actions, learning and exploring different possibilities. I really appreciate all these responses. And one of our objectives here is just really to kind of level set what our understanding of what strategic thinking is. You can see we're all kind of coming into it with some shared themes, but a couple of differences and nuances. So I'm going to go ahead and transition it to Giselle and share our thoughts on what strategic thinking is.
Thank you, Brittany. And so let's get into what strategic thinking is. And in the most basic sense, strategic thinking, it's about analyzing opportunities and problems from a broad perspective and understanding the potential impact your actions might have on the future of your organization, your team, or perhaps the bottom line. Now, when you think strategically, you can lift your head sort of above your day to day work and consider the larger environment in which you're operating. Now, you ask questions, you challenge assumptions about how things operate in your company, in your industry, in your group, everywhere, right? When you think strategically, you also gather complex, sometimes ambiguous data and interpret it, and you use the insights you've gained to make smart choices and select the appropriate course of action. One quote that I really like, it says, strategy is a decision we make in the present based on learning from the past about how to grow or defend in the future. So that is in its basic form, right? Also, strategic thinking is most likely a core competency for leadership within your company, right? It is a basic leadership skill to think strategically. And usually those behaviors that are associated with this strategic thinking is translating vision and strategy into operational activity to team members. Leveraging, an enterprise perspective when considering business decisions. Take a broad, big picture view of organization to help prioritize short-term, day-to-day tasks. And then the last one here is to focus the team on efforts that add value to the organization. Now, some of you might think like, well, I don't have direct reports, like that whole, oftentimes I know because I was there, like we think the whole strategic thinking is only for those that are in leadership, that's for my senior leadership, perhaps my manager, my director, the VP, that doesn't really apply to me, or that's really not my job. And that is not right. That is not accurate. We all need to be strategic thinkers. And as you develop your career, you need to make that one of your behaviors, one of your core competencies. So, next up here, I have a very simple process that can help you understand what strategic thinking is. Now, this is a very simple model that we can use to understand the process. And in this model, you could see how being strategic is a simple three-step process where we first defined our current situation. That's the where we are now. Then we determine the future state. Where do we want to go? And then finally, we develop a plan of action on how to get there, right? I want you to notice here that the future state comes before the plan on how to get there. It all comes down to problem solving and being disciplined about problem solving. Now, the issue is that oftentimes we tend to jump to the plan of action instead of spending enough time understanding the current situation and then really defining what the future state looks like. Where do we really want to go? And then what happens with that is that we end up solving for the wrong issue, right? Now, when we don't understand the current state, we make assumptions, we miss opportunities, and most importantly, we waste time because we made up a plan, as sort of that knee jerk reaction, right? Oh, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this. All these things that we're going to do, we're on it, we're going to make it happen. And then after we do all that, we realize that was not the actual problem that we were trying to solve. Back to square one. Okay, well, maybe let's look at some other things that we can do, right? Not dedicating enough time to understanding what the real problem is and what the future looks like. Now, what if I told you that many of you already use strategic thinking, already have that as part of your daily routine or perhaps on a regular basis? How many of you, and I'll say with like perhaps, either thumbs up or you can put it in the chat, um, reactions, whatever you would like to use. How many of you use some sort of GPS application on your phone on a regular basis? Yes, right? I see stuff in the chat. I see lots of yeses. Yes, absolutely. All right, so as we talk about this sort of GPS application, what is the first thing that we need to do in order to get directions to go anywhere? We need to choose a starting point, right? And to be even more precise, oftentimes the app asks you uh, if you want to use your exact location. So it's not only asking you for like, oh, where do you want to start, but like, hey, would you like to use your specific current location? Now, because it wants to make sure that we provide enough information about the current situation, because if not, it is not going to be able to give us the correct directions, right? If we don't tell it exactly where we want to begin. And then the next thing that we need to enter, is it the steps? No, it's our destination. The next step is, where do we want to go? Where exactly are we headed? Right? It doesn't start giving you directions and options right away. Like, oh, you're starting here. Well, maybe you could go here or here or here. It needs a destination in order to work. And it's asking you for that specific destination, for that future state, right? It can't give you directions if you don't tell it where you're going. And then once we have entered the destination, then it gives us a plan. So the next time that you use your GPS or whatever application you use on your phone, etc., or in your car, I want you to think about that strategic thinking. And I want you to remember that, hey, as a strategic thinking or thinker, how can I start thinking about, what the current state is, what the future really looks like, and then figured out how we get there. Now, I want to share with you another model, and this one it's a little bit more complicated, and we're not going to get too deep into it. There are many models out there. Some of them go into a lot of depth. I don't really think that in order to start thinking strategically, you need to use those crazy models. I think if you keep it pretty simple, it makes it easier for you, but it also makes it easier for the people that you're trying to demonstrate those behaviors. So, like I said, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time. But what I want you to notice here is that at the very bottom, it starts where we are now. And you notice that the where we are now is a much larger area, right? It spends a lot of time in the where we are now, and then where do we need to go or where do we need to be? And then last is how do we get there at the very top? So, like, it spends a ton of time figuring out where we are and what are the tools that we need to understand where we are and then where we're headed. And then once we have that really defined, then we can spend some time figuring out how to get there. Again, another model, keeping it simple would be, my best recommendation. Now, I have a problem that I need you to help me with. And this is my personal share today. So I have two daughters, and they are 12, almost 13, and 9. And one of them keeps her room very clean, love it. The other one, not so much. So this is not an exact picture of her room, God forbid, but um, this is just hypothetically, it's not too far from that. Now, I have an issue that my oldest daughter always has her room. It's a total mess. She's a slob, and I just need to know how can I solve this problem? Now, we're going to shift gears a little bit and we're going to work on this quick activity. So I want you we're going to use Slido again. So I need you to help me with my problem. Can you please give me some ideas on how can I address this issue? How can I get my daughter to keep her room clean? So we're going back to Slido, same code. Could you tell me what should I do?
I love seeing these responses so far. So we have define clean. That's where our starting spot is. Offer a reward system, provide storage solutions, incentive.
Hire a maid.
Yes. Give examples of
Oh, goodness.
expectations. Put them in the same room. Ask your daughter what she thinks is clean. Understand why she's not keeping it clean. Be grateful only one child is messy, Giselle.
Yes.
Work with her.
Hopefully my rotten apple won't rot the other one, right?
Keep them separated so they can't influence each other. We have taken everything left out and put it in a garbage bag, but it's kind of extreme. Okay, so sharing some other
I
ideas.
do like that though. That was like my mom's method. Just put it all in the garbage. It's gone.
Get a puppy that chews the stuff on the floor. I do see that one person maybe cannot hear me. Okay, I think it's just maybe one individual. They may need to leave and re-enter. Okay. I love all these. Lots of great ideas. Is there anything else that you want to share here, Giselle, before I kind of share a thought?
Yeah, and I love this, Brittany. I love all of these. As a matter of fact, I see that somebody said my daughter has ADHD, and I tell her multiple times. So she does have ADHD as well. Pure coincidence there. But it's amazing how, as soon as I told you that I had a problem and I needed you to give me ideas, right? We started coming up with 1,000 ideas. Hire maid, heavier consequences like restrict access, do this, do that, right? But I did see one that said, "Can you define clean?" So I love that because it started with a question, starting to understand more about what my problem really is. Is it the messy room? Is that what's really bothering me, right? Like, why is it bothering me? And I see tons of ideas here, but think about how many times we do that. When we hear a problem, when somebody gives us a problem, boom, solution. This is what we need to do. This is what we could do about it. But what does the future stay look like? What do we act? Where do we really want to go? What is the end goal here? Is it a clean room? Is it understanding of values? Is it, I mean, and we could we usually spend a lot more time doing this exercise in person, right? But it's to understand that, our first reaction is to try to come up with ideas versus understanding what the real problem is and what the end goal looks like. So thank you all for engaging with us on that quick exercise.
I really love that exercise because it's a great way for us to just drive home that point that jumping into a solution mode is not a strategy. And also, planning alone is not a strategy. So, we do have this great video that we're going to play here in a second. And just like I just stated, it says a plan is not a strategy. This one is from Harvard Business Review. I will share before we get into it that it is a little bit lengthy. The content is really great. So that's why we decided to keep it in here. But it is about 9.5 minutes long. So I would ask you to practice some intentional listening because it is a little bit lengthy. Maybe grab a piece of paper or an electronic sticky note and just jot down maybe one thing that's surprising to you in the video because I can almost promise, I can't make any guarantees, but I can almost promise that there will be something in here that is surprising. And after the video, I'll ask you all, maybe what that one thing was that you wrote down. So let's go ahead and roll it. And if for some reason you're not hearing audio, you can drop a note in the chat and we'll be sure to adjust.
This thing called planning has been around for a long, long time. People would plan out the activities they're going to engage in. More recently, has been a discipline called strategy. People have put those two things together to call something strategic planning. Unfortunately, those things are not the same, strategy and planning, so just putting them together and calling it strategic planning doesn't help. What most strategic planning is in the world of business has nothing to do with strategy. It's got the word, but it's not. It's a set of activities that the company says it's going to do. We're going to improve customer experience. We're going to open this new plant. We're going to start a new talent development program. A whole list of them, and they all sound good. But the results of all of those are not going to make the company happy because they didn't have a strategy. So what's a strategy? A strategy is an integrated set of choices that positions you on a playing field of your choice in a way that you win. So there's a theory. Strategy has a theory. Here's why we should be on this playing field, not this other one. And here's how, on that playing field, we're going to be better than anybody else at serving the customers on that playing field. That theory has to be coherent. It has to be doable. You have to be able to translate that into actions for it to be a great strategy. Planning does not have to have any such coherence. And it typically is what people in manufacturing want, the few things they want to build a new plant, and the marketing people want to launch a new brand, and the talent people want to hire more people. There tends to be a list that has no internal coherence to it and no specification of a way that that is going to accomplish collectively some goal for the company. See, planning is quite comforting. Plans typically have to do with the resources you're going to spend. So we're going to build a plant. We're going to hire some people. We're going to launch a new product. those are all things that are on the cost side of businesses. Who controls your costs? Who's the customer of your costs? The answer is you are. You decide how many square feet to lease, how many raw materials to buy, how many people to hire. Those are more comfortable because you control them. A strategy, on the other hand, specifies an outcome, a competitive outcome that you wish to achieve, which involves customers wanting your product or service enough that they will buy enough of it to make the profitability that you'd like to make. The tricky thing about that is that you don't control them. You might wish you could, but you can't. They decide, not you. That's a harder trick. So that means putting yourself out and saying, here's what we believe will happen. We can't prove it in advance. We can't guarantee it. But this is what we want to have happen and that we believe will happen. It's much easier to say, I'll build a factory, I will hire more people, etc., than I will have customers end up liking our offering more than those of competitors. The tricky thing about planning is that while you're planning, chances are at least one competitor is figuring out how to win. When U.S. air carriers were busily planning, what routes to fly and there was this little company in Texas called Southwest that had a strategy for winning. And, at first that looked largely irrelevant because it was tiny. What Southwest Airlines was aiming for was an outcome. What they wanted to be is a substitute for Greyhound, a way more convenient way to get around at a price that wasn't extraordinarily much greater than a Greyhound bus. Southwest said everybody else is flying hub and spoke. They have hubs and they fly hub and spoke. We're going to fly point to point so that we don't have aircraft waiting on the ground because you only make money when you're in the air. We're going to only fly 737s, one kind of aircraft, so that our gates are set up for those, our systems are set up for those, our training, our simulations are set up. We're not going to offer meals on the flights because we're going to specialize in short flights. We're not going to book through travel agents. We're going to encourage people to book online because that's less expensive for everybody and more convenient. So their strategy ended up being having a substantially lower cost than any of the major carriers so that they could offer substantially lower prices. Because it had a way of winning, it got bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger, and bigger, and bigger, and bigger, until it flies the most passenger seat miles in America. The major carriers were not trying to win against one another. They were all playing to play, as I say. They were playing to participate. Maybe buy more planes, get more gates, maybe grow some, not having a theory of here's how we could be better than our competitors. And that was fine until somebody came along and said, here's a way to be better than everybody else for this segment. And so that segment then goes. It's gone. And the main playing to play players have to share a smaller pie that's left over after Southwest takes whatever share it wants. If you're trying to escape this planning trap, this comfort trap of doing something that's comfortable but not good for you, how do you start? The most important thing to recognize is that strategy will have angst associated with it. It'll make you feel somewhat nervous because as a manager, chances are you've been taught you should do things that you can prove in advance. You can't prove in advance that your strategy will succeed. You can look at a plan and say, well, all of these things are doable. Let's just do those because they're within our control, but they won't add up to much. In strategy, you have to say, if our theory is right, about what we can do and how the market will react, this will position us in an excellent way. Just accept the fact that you can't be perfect on that and you can't know for sure. And that is not being a bad manager, right? That is being a great leader, because you're giving your organization the chance to do something great. The second thing I do is say, lay out the logic of your strategy clearly. What would have to be true about ourselves, about the industry, about competition, about customers for this strategy to work? Why do you do that? It's because you can then watch the world unfold, right? And if something that you say is in the logic that would have to be true for this to work is not working out quite the way you hoped, it'll allow you to tweak your strategy. And strategy is a journey. What you want to have is a mechanism for tweaking it, toning it, and refining it so it gets better and better as you go along. Another thing that helps with strategy is not letting it get overcomplicated. It's great if you can write your strategy on a single page. Here's where we're choosing to play. Here's how we're choosing to win. Here are the capabilities we need to have in place. Here are the management systems. And that's why it's going to achieve this goal, this aspiration that we have. Then you lay out the logic, what must be true for that all to work out the way we hope. Go do it and watch and tweak as you go along. That may feel somewhat more worry-making, angst-making than planning, but I would tell you that if you plan, that's a way to guarantee losing. If you do strategy, it gives you the best possible chance of winning.
Thanks so much for playing that. And as promised, I would like to see in the chat, was there anything that surprised you about that video? Any aha moments? Anything that stood out to you? Please feel free to add it to the chat there. Giselle and I would love to hear from you. I like the use of the term aspiration instead of goal. I do too. Yeah. The fact that strategic thinking, it has nothing to do with strategy. It's really interesting, yes. To be a good leader, you don't always have to know the correct answers. And the disconnect between strategy and planning. Strategies can be simple, start small, and identify barriers to growth. I do see in here someone said, it's a sort of twist to think about this differently, strategy versus planning. And planning is the guarantee way to lose. Yeah, so I really like, a lot of the things that you're sharing in here. A very, very insightful video. It gives us a lot to think about. And I want to move into this playing to win strategy overview, that they talked about in the video. Again, Giselle and I wish that we could spend 12 hours with you all. We won't be able to really dig into, you could have a whole workshop on playing to win from Harvard Business Review, but we wanted to kind of consolidate and share some of the key themes from it. And then, you can think about this and it can give you a jumping off point if you want to explore it further. So there are, the really kind of key messages. Are we playing to play or playing to win? And that really changes our mindset then when we're thinking about things. So playing to win is really kind of like, it's unlike those conventional strategic thinking planning processes that you all have added here in the chat, where that emphasis is on planning and creating a perfect, detailed articulation of what our future might be. But if we look at it, the playing to win overview provides these 5 key choices that we'll share in a minute. And then the way to get to those choices is to think about these 3 key areas. So the first one is that strategy is all about choices. We're going to have to choose to do some things and then choose to not do others. And the extra layer is really know the reasoning behind why we chose not to do other things. And then strategy is also about increasing our odds to success, but it's not a perfect process. We're not definitely going to land at that destination. As it was shared in the video, we have maybe a theory, we have some data, some insights. This is why we're going this way, but things may change and there's no guarantee. And then the last piece that they share is strategy making combines rigor and creativity. And I keep getting distracted by all these great chat notes. I see the last one in here, strategy should make you anxious because if it's easy, it's not aspirational. And that all is so, so true. So we'll move into the next one here about the strategy cascade. So some of this displayed during the video, but if you check out Harvard Business Review, you can dig into these questions further. But really, the playing to win approach involves answering 5 key questions. What is our winning aspiration? Where will we play? How will we win in chosen markets? What capabilities must we have? And what management systems do we need? And so you're probably thinking like, okay, that, sounds really great if you were an enterprise, a company, an organization, or even at the department level. But what about me as the individual? How can I really start to kind of dig into this and think about the application piece? And so for individuals, this really means setting clear objectives, analyzing strengths and weaknesses, which I saw someone's chat question about what is SWOT. So that's a tool that we'll share in a little bit, and that digs into those strengths and weaknesses. It's also about strategizing to maximize advantages, and it's about continuous learning and improving. So one thing I like to share here when we try to think about how can we apply this as an individual is if you think about your job description, we all were hired into the roles that we're in, and there was probably definitely a job description. And the way that many job descriptions are still written today is a holdover from, sort of working in a factory or a mine, and you're doing the same routine tasks over and over again. But in the modern business world, the incumbent actually engages in a set of projects. They sort of come and go, and change is a constant. I'm sure that that resonates with many of us. And this will kind of continue to be the case throughout your career. But you have this job description and it includes some things, and you get assigned projects, and you have some choices in that. You have this sort of enormous room to choose where to play, if we're using their words. So you get to decide where to play, even if it's within your job description. And that task really helps us to determine how we're going to best use our resources to, support our bosses, to support our organizations and the customers that we may serve. And it's also important for us as the individual to recognize that that's not just an independent choice. It's also tied to that how to win piece. So, what is the thing that's going to produce the most value? You have to kind of get choosy on those projects that you may participate in. Sometimes we don't have a choice, but sometimes we do. So what are the things that I can get involved in as an individual that are going to best position me, provide the most value, support my manager, support my team, etc. And then I think another way to start to look at this as an individual is that management system piece. We're making these decisions about where to play, how to play, and it's leveraging the capabilities that we currently have. But if we think about our strategy, oftentimes, where we are today, what we're doing now isn't going to get us to that strategic place that we want to go to. So you have to have those management systems in place. And what I mean by this is maybe you have to take a finance class or a presentation skills class, or you're going to spend some time with a mentor or build a network. You want to make sure that you have these things in mind, because they're not necessarily going to happen without having that management system in place. And then absolutely the winning aspiration piece comes at the front end on this slide, but it sort of actually comes at the end here, is how are you going to tie all of these things to an outcome that is exciting and motivational to you? If it isn't, then it's time to kind of rework some of those choices. Where am I choosing to play? What projects am I getting involved in? Make some different decisions so that way you are excited, you are motivated about that place that you're headed. So that's kind of a lot, but I wanted to take the time because I think it's super important to look at this from the perspective of the individual. Like, how can I really take this video, take this information and apply it to me? So that's something that you can explore further. Look at your job description, think about the jobs that you're in and reflect on what other choices you may need to change to start playing in a different place that will help you get to where it is that you want to go. And again, strategy is what you do and not what you say. So it's really about all these choices that you're making along the way. We can go ahead and keep pushing on here. Julie, gave us a really good intro at the beginning of the session. And one of the things that she highlighted, and that's really important for us to touch on here, is strategy versus tactics. So we made that distinction between strategy and planning, but this quote is also really important. So I'm going to read it to you. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. And tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And this really emphasizes the importance of both strategy and execution. A long-term strategy without those specific actions can lead to slow progress. And then also, if we have random actions without a clear strategy, that can result in failure. So we have to be balancing that long-term vision with the short-term steps, those projects, those things that we're getting involved in. And so the next couple of slides that we have for you introduces you to some tools that can help explore getting better at the tactics. Like I said, we don't mean to overwhelm, but we won't be able to dig into all of these to give them justice. But we wanted to give you an overview of some things that we found to be helpful. So I'll talk about some strategic thinking self-assessments. We'll talk about SWOT analysis at a very high level. And then we'll also talk about De Bono's 6 thinking hats. So we'll go ahead and move into the first one here. And really, again, any of these tools can be used for analysis in strategic conversations. They can help level set you as you're considering your own personal strategy. And so for strategic thinking assessments, sometimes it can be overwhelming when we're thinking about our strategy of like, how do I know where I stand? I'm not really sure even what my starting point is. And Giselle alluded to this before. And so some of these assessments, they are free, and we sourced 2 of them here, but they really just kind of start to prompt you. And you can see a sample of the questions here on the left side. This one is from LinkedIn Learning, and it is scenario based. So it has you really consider how you might respond in different scenarios. And yes, we absolutely will be able to share the links here. I will share them at the end so they don't get lost in the chat as we go along, but we'll do that. And I believe we'll be able to share the information after the session. Great question. And then the second one that's listed here on the screen is from Harvard, this Manage Mentor program. And many of these questions center around coaching and feedback. So you remember Giselle shared that she got some feedback about needing to be more strategic. And so it allows you to start to recognize, see patterns, and reflect on the questions that are listed in there. And it can help you think about what are your areas of opportunity. So really great starting point is to leverage some of these assessments. And the next slide here, we'll be able to, again, share this after the session. I would ask you to look at the questions that are listed on here and think about it. Think about how you're cultivating relationships, how you're managing your time. Think about the feedback that you've received. So these are just really great questions. And thank you, Julie, so much for adding that in the chat there. I really appreciate it. I'm not going to drain this one. This is one to look at later. We'll keep moving to the next tool here. This is SWOT analysis. So I know that some folks are not familiar because one person at least added in the chat, what is SWOT? And a SWOT analysis is a helpful way for a team to begin or continue the conversation about what's working and what's not working, as well as what maybe potentially exciting or concerning things are happening and how we need to start to consider that and plan for the future. So you can see here through the SWOT, you would explore what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what are the opportunities and the threats. This can be great on an individual basis as well as a team basis, and there's tons of great resources on it. I will see here, I see Julie's adding those. The next one that we wanted to share with you all is De Bono's 6 thinking hats. So how many of you are familiar with this? I do want to see in the chat. How many have heard of De Bono's 6 thinking hats? Yes. I see one at least. No, okay. Have not. Okay, so this is new for some folks. I really like that. Kind of makes me kind of happy and excited to be able to share something that you haven't heard of that you can explore further. Okay, good. So De Bono's thinking hats comes from Dr. Edward De Bono, listed there at the bottom. We have our sources, 1985. It is a tool to help ensure that a team is analyzing an issue from a variety of perspectives. And it really helps to foster diversity of opinion and discussion. And so to try to kind of simplify it, it's broken down into these 6 different imaginary hats. And each hat represents a different type or mode of thinking. And this really allows a team to look at a decision from multiple viewpoints. And it encourages collaboration because everyone can be invited to play a hat. So I think the best sort of practice or way to try this is if you're on a project team or, collaborating, working with others, maybe say, hey, can one individual look at it from this lens? Can another individual look at it from this lens? Because sometimes it can be overwhelming or you're really hyper focused on, maybe your silo, your area of expertise. And if we assign each other to look at it just from one angle, it can be super supportive to the whole overall. And so some of the ways that this gets broken down, you can see the hats listed there. The white hat represents factual, neutral information. The red hat is focused on emotions and feelings. That can be super helpful when we're launching a new product, a new program at an enterprise, and we need to consider how the change is going to affect people's feelings, emotions about it, and how we're going to work through that change management. If you maybe go into the project with one individual that's sort of hypersensitive or wearing that red hat, if you will, it can be really helpful. Black hat is about caution, criticisms. Yellow can be about optimism, positive thinking. What are the benefits? The green is about creativity, maybe innovation. And the blue hat there is about process control and the overview of the thinking process. So by wearing these sort of metaphorical hats, participants or folks on a project team can approach problems from different angles and lead to more effective decision making. So this is a really great thing for you to dig into further because I see many of you don't know about it. And I really appreciate that feedback, Lindsay. You said I really love this a lot. And I'm curious to see, does anybody see yourself maybe leveraging this with your team or a project team? Or how might you leverage this? I'd love to see, some responses in the chat.
I've actually seen teams, Brittany, that actually get like color hats and go into like they have them in a conference room, and like when they're gonna go in, they want to practice, so they actually put on the hats. It's a it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it just kind of keeps you focused on like the different roles. It's pretty cool.
I love that so much, Giselle. We need to do that for our team. We need to
Agreed.
buy hats for our project. And I think it's
Yes.
just a great reminder too, like, oh, I have the red hat on. I need to be focused on the emotions for this change. And I see some great things coming in here. I've only heard of the devil's advocate before, having different hats instead of focusing on only one single perspective. Yeah. Some folks have said they've done similar things for safety walkdowns where you have different people look for specific things or topics. Definitely in a plant setting, I could totally see that. And I know and remember from our experiences, Giselle, of a similar. It's good to have a mix of people wearing different hats for those perspectives. Yeah, I really appreciate the feedback there. So I would encourage you all to look into this further if it sounds interesting to you. There's lots of great info on there, specifically on LinkedIn Learning, for how you might be able to leverage this and make it applicable to you as an individual or your team. And we'll keep moving to the last one here. I know that this wasn't listed as one of our 3 tools, but we threw it in here because it's certainly worth a mention, talking about how to minimize silos. Silos are when we get sort of caught up in the perspective of our own individual self or our own team department and forget that, we're part of a whole enterprise or a whole group. And something that we can do to help minimize this is engaging in cross-functional and bottom-up involvement in projects from the start. So an example of this is if you're starting a new project, maybe make sure that you're involving all the various stakeholders that you need to from the very beginning. Maybe you need to involve sales, finance, shipping. Maybe there's a component of the project where you're going to be sending something out, or marketing. Sometimes it could be groups that you aren't necessarily thinking of, and that through the natural progression of a project, they kind of come afterwards or at the end of the project. A good way to do this is trying to get everybody involved from the beginning and hear their perspective, because then it can change the trajectory of what you're doing. Another thing to think about for minimizing silos is to eliminate unnecessary hierarchy and formality. The fewer channels that employees have to go through, the easier it is to communicate and collaborate. I don't know about you all, but with AI, chat, GPT, all of the different various platforms, it can start to become very overwhelming as an employee. Like, I don't know, is it in this Teams chat? Is it on this Teams page? Is it in this Zoom thing? Is it in this folder? Is it on this website? So the fewer channels that employees have to go through, it's really important for us to all start thinking that way. And another piece that's super important and helpful is considering physical space and the layout. I think we don't do this often enough, but thinking about meeting spaces, how are the desks going to be set up? Or in a virtual setting, are we requiring everyone to be on camera or not? And why did we come to that decision? This can really affect the level of collaboration. And then the last one that we have on here is unify communication systems and processes. So incorporating tools that will encourage information sharing. Maybe De Bono's Thinking Hats was new to you. Maybe you don't want to just keep it to yourself. How might you cascade that tool and share it with others? And, more sort of tactically, are there shared calendars, video conferences, instant messaging? Like, how are we best leveraging the communication tools that we have? So that way everyone is really clear on what we're working on. So definitely wanted to call out this one here, even though it wasn't listed as a tool, because it's really important in strategic thinking. And I will ask you all, what other ideas might you offer to eliminate silos? Is that something that you experience in your workplace? And maybe how have you tackled that? because it's not just about what Giselle and I share. I know you all have lots of great things to share as you've been contributing in the chat. What other ideas do you have about eliminating silos? Anything? Okay, well, I don't see anything in the chat. I know it takes,
Oh,
a couple
they
seconds.
they just started popping up.
Here we go. Okay, perfect. Allow and promote bringing different perspectives. Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you sharing that there. Ask questions in a group from those that may not be participating. Developing shared goals. I really love that a lot, Emily. Yes, it's so important for us to get together from the beginning and make sure everyone has a voice in those goals that we're all working towards. Engaging
And
the workforce.
Julie,
Yeah.
yeah, Julie added one at the beginning, or first, bringing people together in meetings that wouldn't normally get invited. I love that.
Yeah. A common issue is when different departments are not engaged early and often. So when they are engaged, they're defensive about their own priorities. Yes, that is so true. That's why we shared that one at the beginning. If we can underscore it, it is super important. It can be hard sometimes. There's lots of things that are changing at the same time. Sometimes we don't know everybody that needs to be involved, but as best as possible, make the effort. I really appreciate that, seeking out others. Please, continue to keep those chats coming because, as we might continue moving along, others that are in this session are going to be able to see and learn from the chats that you're contributing. And at this time, I'll transition it back to Giselle to start to take us to, the end, give us some more thoughts about communicating strategy. So thank you all.
All right, thanks, Brittany. And now we're going to be talking about how to demonstrate that you have these strategic thinking skills. So we all know that developing strategic thinking skills is important, right? We've been talking about it. We know that it is super important, but many of us don't realize how critical it is to your career advancement to show these skills to your boss, to your leaders, to senior leaders, etc. Showing strategic thinking skills tells your managers, your supervisors, and your leaders that you're able to think for yourself and make decisions that position the organization for the future, that you're really looking at that big picture, right? Not just the day to day, not just tomorrow or next week, but like, hey, how does this affect, you know, our goals, our objectives, the business as a whole? It assures them that you aren't just making decisions in a vacuum, but that you're actually considering and thinking about how other departments might be affected or how the outside world will respond. Now, the first point here is to bring a point of view to the table. So your leaders, they want to know what you think, and they view your, sometimes your worthiness for promotion right through the lens of like how ready you are to make those bigger decisions. So by asking yourself, like, do people know where I stand, right? You can sharpen your ability to demonstrate this skill. And I have a little story, but the one thing I would also say is that use the word often. I mean, I can tell you that for me, it started clicking in my brain and it started having an impact. Remember when I told you about when my director shared the feedback with me to start thinking more strategically? I actually started using the word more often. And as I learned what it was, as I learned how to be more strategic and how to demonstrate it, I started using the word. I started, asking the questions, how does this fit into our strategy? How are we thinking strategically? Does this support our group strategy, our company strategy? Like, how can we be more strategic? Those sort of things like also cue your brain to like start thinking more strategically as well. Now, the second point here is that show that you can initiate innovation and bring strategic change. So, not just like, I have this idea, I'm looking at the bigger picture. I think this could make a really big impact into our organization. How can we bring in other departments, et cetera? But hey, is this something that I could perhaps, move forward with? Or how can I move this forward? What would we need to do in order to move this idea forward? So think about those things, and I have just a little sort of story and name. We're using a sort of generic name here, so we'll use Tim. But he represents a random like sort of leader in our organization, supervisor. But Tim made efforts to update his understanding, of trends and to refresh his network, but then realized that he wasn't putting the knowledge learned to good use. So one of the first changes that he made was to block 30 minutes on his calendar before any important meetings. So he realized that, hey, I'm coming in, but I'm not able to share strategic thoughts. I'm barely able to participate because I'm going from one to the next. So I don't have the time to collect, my thoughts. So every time he seemed that he went to meetings, he seemed kind of unprepared. He was less vocal and less capable of synthesizing, right, and sharing his knowledge because he wasn't taking the time to really think about how all of this fits together. So just that half hour once or twice a week would, allowed him to shape his point of view on important issues and really contribute in a whole different way. So the result of that was that Tim, his efforts started to pay off, over time, and he was able to start shifting his contributions and contribute more in senior executive meetings, right, on, operational input, strategic input. He took the time to package his ideas into more of a vision for the organization and engage also his peers in a new discussion about how the vision could impact their areas as well. So having that greater clarity of vision also enhance his effectiveness as well. He was able to see how his team was missing, right, some of the specific skills that were needed to support that vision. So now rather than just letting go or no acting on it, he was able to engage with the right folks to make sure that, those skills were acquired by the team and the things that they needed to do for that. And that really started kicking, this like career movement, for him. So that's just a quick story that I wanted to share. Now, about communicating the strategy, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I do want to emphasize the importance of, communicating that strategy so that there is alignment within the group, the organization, the department. It goes on and on, right? And ultimately the enterprise, of course. But sharing that strategy with anyone or everyone that has to act on that strategy, or perhaps that will be affected by the changes that are in that strategy. And also those that have insight into possible challenges and could offer some valuable feedback. So oftentimes we think about the people who will be directly affected, but don't necessarily include those that perhaps might have some insights into the potential challenges to implement that strategy. And then think through the following key messages. The process that you used to arrive, right? Including what were the conditions, the barriers, etc. Because oftentimes you know what you went through and your thinking process, etc., etc. And then you're bringing this sort of package vision and strategy, but then the people who you are communicating it to, they don't have that background. So we sort of expect them to understand how you got there, but if they don't have the full picture, it is kind of hard to get behind that strategy because they need sort of that background, all that, that summary of the how you got there. And then the heart of your strategy, where you will play and how you will win, which Brittany was walking us through, how the business will change when the new strategy is in place, right? What are the benefits? Like, where is it that we're trying to get to? And then how are we going to measure success? Right? How do we make sure that yes, it was effective. Yes, we got where we needed to be, and then what are the next steps in making the new strategy work. So all those are super important as we communicate our strategy. Now, in here, I have a couple of tips on strategic thinking in practice, as we have talked about a ton of stuff today. I know it's sort of drinking out of the fire hose, but keep it simple. We said it at the beginning, and then it was also mentioned in the video. If you notice, keep it simple. You don't want to make it complicated. Challenge assumptions, that questioning attitude, right? I think that's in the nuclear industry as a whole. That's sort of one of our core values, or our core skills that we need to have, is to uh, have that curious mind and challenge those assumptions. Speak the same language, of course. Surface issues early, not waiting until perhaps we're sort of in that implementation phase, or like, oh, thinking, man, maybe that won't be an issue, and just moving forward, like addressing, even if they're small, but addressing those little things early are going to ensure that you don't have to come back to it later, because, in fact, perhaps an issue that was relatively small became much bigger. Identifying priorities, having like 15 priorities is the same as having none. And, we're all guilty of this, right? We have like many focus areas, and focus on this 15 and this 12 and this 5, etc. So when we talk about strategy, it's important to keep it simple and identifying those priorities, and continuously monitor performance, continuously monitor where we're at, how are we doing, are we still meeting the intent? Are we still on track with the initial vision that we had, and the problem that we want to solve, the place where we want to be, and then check and adjust constantly. Sometimes we have a vision, and then as we're working through it, as we're finding out more information, we realize that changes need to be made, and it's sometimes tough to accept. But again, better to realize that early rather than later. So those are just some tips for being strategic in practice. And now I want to shift a little bit as we finish here the last couple of slides in for your development. We talked a little bit about that, how important it is, how you demonstrate your strategic thinking skills. But my challenge here for you is, are you being strategic with your development? We know that NAYGN and all the several groups, we have a ton of other groups, and WIN and many others, where we are able to work on our development, have a ton of resources, etc. So it is important that, as you are learning to be strategic, that you also use that for your own development. And here are a few thoughts anticipating what changes will have impact on your development. Then challenge, how are you challenging the status quo with your development activities? It's sometimes we were very focused on uh, perhaps certain things, or we're very focused on doing our job well, etc. And that is great for demonstrating our performance, but making sure that we're also taking time? How am I constantly, right, developing myself? Even if it's just a little bit of time, don't ever lose sight of your own development. And then interpret, how are you leveraging and interpreting the various sets of input you receive from assessments, coaching, feedback? How are you using your strategic thinking to put all of that together? The feedback that you're getting from your one-on-ones, the feedback that you're getting from assessments, the feedback that you're getting from perhaps other leaders, etc. How are you putting all that together? And then coming up with a vision for your own development and how are you acting on it. So don't think that you can't start practicing those strategic thinking skills by developing a vision for your own development. Do you have a plan, right? How is your IDP or individual development plan, and how are you using strategy to put that plan together? Then decide what development decisions are you waiting to make? What actions are you waiting for, right? How can you communicate that to your manager, to your supervisor? What else can I do? Hey, this is what I want to do. What would I need to get there? What would I need to get this resource, this training, whatever it is? Then align, how do your development actions align with your team, your department, right? Your organization goals, even your site. So how are you taking those development skills? Like, hey, I want to learn how to be better at finance, and here's why. And here's how I think that that aligns with our goals, with our department goals, with our strategic goals, with the strategic goals of the organization. And then last but not least is learned. You know, how are you learning from others' development experiences? It's important to share that, to talk about that, discuss it, because it is critical that, you know, if somebody has been through it, had perhaps had a development opportunity or went to XYZ training, etc., and it was, you know, really great or not that great, making sure that you're learning from those experiences as well and not just navigating on your own. This is not something that you want to do by yourself. Development is not something that you have to do on your own. You have your manager, your peers. You all should be supporting each other. All right, I know that was a lot, and I can tell you that strategic thinking is something that you're always, no matter what you do, what your role is, even in your personal life, it is a skill that you're always going to use. You're always are going to be better off developing it, getting better at it. So we have just a few resources here for you. Brittany talked about the six thinking hats, playing to win, your next five moves. There's, you know, several books here that you can get and that we recommend that are going to sort of help you build those skills. Now, keep in mind that, you know, strategy is the bridge getting us there, getting us from here to there, right? We talked about that at the beginning, from our current situation to our desired future state. Strategy is not planning. We saw that in the video, and strategy isn't a guarantee and is uncomfortable. And we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I hope that this module, you know, has opened your thinking to the criticality of being a more strategic leader, a more strategic thinker. I hope that you've been able to learn a few things and that you put that into practice. You keep getting better and better at it. Strategy is something that we should start learning early in our careers, but it never stops, right? We get better and better at it with more practice. So that is all we have for you today. We really appreciate the opportunity of being here and sharing all that information with you. And at this time, Julie, I would like to open it up for questions if we have any and if we have
Okay,
time.
I'm not seeing any open questions, Giselle. So what I'm going to do is actually hand it over to Price Collins, and he will finish up.
Perfect.
Thank you, Julie. I'd like to give a special shout out to all the facilitators and speakers who helped out with this today. There's been a lot of planning that's gone on behind the scenes for several months now with making this a success. And as always, we could not be successful without feedback from this session, thoughts, comments, all of that. To make this successful in the future, whatnot, as we go through the years for this. We have talked and we will make this presentation available. We will include this in the PD session library. When we have the YouTube video uploaded, I will create a special posting in the library, the PowerPoint, and the link to the YouTube channel will be there. As a reminder, we have our third and final webinar of PD Week 2024 tomorrow, and we are looking forward to kicking that off. That is going to be given by Jody Porter, who, if you recall, gave our webinar back in April that we got a lot of really good positive feedback on. We also have the on-demand session for our Veterans Day Spotlight that is already available right now on the PD Library, and our focus on the craft spotlight will be made available prior to Friday. So with that, I will close us out today and have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.